There's news in the NFL today, and it's time to break it down in the only way we know how. Hot Route style, with our spin on football headlines with a mix of frozen tundras, neck rolls, and grass-stained jersey.
Hello and welcome back to Hot Routes. I am your host, Paul Hodowanic, and with me is Matthew Coller. Matt, how are we doing today?
I am good. We are just a few days away from the NFL Combine, which Purple Insider will be represented at by me. So I'm really excited about that.
Yes, and some fun stuff coming there that I know. I don't know if you've announced that yet. So
have not. So
we'll wait just lie in waiting. I'm very excited. I know what it is, and I'm excited to listen. So, a little bit of a weird spot we're in, just in between the Combine and kind of slow, but it never really is slow with the Vikings. O'Connell was on WCCO today, had some more committal comments to Kirk Cousins. And so the way I want to start this out is, I know we've done this before, and this isn't particularly hot rowdy, but I want to just do a very basic pie chart of, is Kirk Cousins signing an extension, or is he moving on? And so I want it to be that extension. So one option can be he's going to play out the end of his contract and move on, or they're going to trade him. And one is they're committing to him for longer than this year, because it feels like it changes every day. I feel like we were at one point with his comments a week ago, and now by this point, it's already maybe starting to wane. Maybe it's not. So I want to know from you how you're feeling.
Yeah, I've kind of been in the same spot, and I am trying not to be moved up or down by the waves that get made by certain comments or certain insider reports or anything else like that. I have thought all along that the best option for the Vikings is to trade Cousins, get draft capital back, create cap space, draft a quarterback, sign a bridge quarterback, and start to move forward with the franchise with Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. And I think that's still the most likely scenario. And I would put that, if we're doing a pie chart here, probably at 60%. I think that is the most likely thing that happens, and that they have tried to maintain Cousins' trade value by not making it really out there that they're interested in trading him. But I believe that they're going to get quite a few phone calls from teams that are looking for serious upgrades at quarterback, and honestly might even be better spots for Kirk Cousins, more full rosters that are ready to potentially win, that could be better for him and give him a better opportunity to win next year, because some of those teams like Pittsburgh, I mean, maybe even Carolina has some good players too, as teams that need to just have a quarterback and they've got a chance to be in the postseason, where the Vikings, I mean, they're an entire defense away and an offensive line away still, with a couple of positions up there. So I'll go with that. And then I'll say that 30% is that he plays out the rest of his contract, that they add void years to it. If they don't like the potential return or they don't like the draft class or whatever else it might be, they could let him play it out, try to compete, sign some people, and then move forward after that. But signing Cousins at $40+ million on an extension just doesn't really match the smell test. You would have to make it a longer term extension in order to lower his cap hit enough early on in the contract. I don't know that locking yourself into an older quarterback on a team that's not ready to win is something that makes sense for Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. So I'm only going to go 10% that he signs an extension. I also think from Kirk's perspective, like, what is your reason to sign? Unless it is unbelievable money, why not play out this year and hit free agency again? He did this in Washington. He bet on himself. You have to give Cousins this. He's the greatest business quarterback who's probably ever existed in the National Football League. And wouldn't it make a lot of sense for someone who's had such a great record of health to play it out, hit free agency, go where he wants, pick his team, and get the highest contract he could possibly get? So I just can't make an extension work on many levels, but I think it is still possible that he is the Vikings quarterback to start 2022.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the like 80-20. He's not going to be here past next year, and 20% maybe he is. Every time O'Connell now has a media availability and doesn't fully commit to Cousins and just doesn't say, yes, we see him here at training camp, it just makes it harder and harder for me to believe that he's going to be here, because it would just be so easy for him to say, yep, he's our quarterback. we're moving on. He'd have to stop answering questions about it. So that tells me they're taking calls, and I don't quite buy it's a leverage play to try to get him to take less money. And so that's why we're going to say not fully that he's our quarterback. I think Kirk probably knows at this point whether they want to keep him or not. And it's just pitching him on, hey, we need some more pieces around you. And so we need you to take less money. Like, I don't know how much leverage there is in, well, we might trade you, we might not, for the specific reason that Kirk has been happy to ride out his contracts. He's not some guy who has looked to lock up real quick. He hasn't had injuries that he needs to worry about reflaring up. I mean, obviously injury is a concern at any point. You get injured this season without that contract extension, but I think we've seen that he'll do that. And so for me, yeah, I guess 20% is just maybe they don't find the return that they like. And so they're just full value. Like, if the value's not there, we're not going to do it. So that's maybe the only reason I see them at this point bringing him back. Because again, it just, every time O'Connell's going to talk, it's going to make headlines when he doesn't give a good answer. And he's had plenty of opportunities to give that fully committal answer, and it hasn't happened yet. So I just don't see how he's on this team unless the entire NFL just isn't going to offer them anything for him.
Well, and I think that it's smart of Kevin O'Connell not to commit either way. I mean, even if they were talking about potential extensions, if O'Connell comes out and says, oh yeah, he's our guy, I've never dreamed more of having any quarterback in my life, well, that gives Cousins' side a lot of leverage to work with in a contract extension. So, I don't know whether it will play out that he'll still be here this year or if they'll trade him. I mean, heck, by the time we publish this episode, they could be making a trade. That usually happens right after we do some sort of recording. But, I do think that this is gaining momentum. And you're right. Every time O'Connell speaks, it's almost like a bat signal is being sent up. Call us with your offers, though. Kirk's our quarterback, but don't be afraid. Don't be a stranger. And how this ends up playing out, I think will be incredibly interesting over the next few weeks, months through the combine. We don't know. Sam Bradford was in a very similar position in Philadelphia and did not get traded until Teddy Bridgewater got hurt right before the season. It could play out that way too, but it feels like they have to resolve this before they go to free agency, because they have to know, how much money do we have to spend? Is it just a little because we've redone Kirk's contract, or is it a lot because we've moved out a lot of that cap space?
Yes. All right. Let's hit one more Vikings question before we get to some fun stuff that I have planned. So if they do move on, that likely means a bridge quarterback. And I know on your show, you've mentioned a few just kind of in passing, but I kind of want to get you down here on your top 2 or 3 bridge quarterbacks. If that's the route that they're going to take, who are kind of the guys that you would anticipate they target or just would like to see them look at?
Yeah, number 1 for me is Marcus Mariota. I think Marcus Mariota is a legitimate talent. And the fact that people like Trevor Siemian were starting as backups last year or got opportunities to start after starting quarterbacks went down, and Marcus Mariota has remained a backup quarterback is kind of mind-blowing. I mean, I think if you were ranking all the quarterbacks in the league, he might be 22nd or 23rd. He definitely wouldn't be 43rd, which is kind of what his position implies by being a backup. He's also 28, which is around the same age that Kirk Cousins began his starting career. And think about that too, that Marcus Mariota was drafted very young. He won some games, got some opportunities, and is a playmaker. He can, run around really effectively. And I think there might even be some upside to Mariota as being a bridge quarterback. So that's the first place I would go. And that means that if you have him and draft someone that's not good to start off with, that you're not just lost in the future, that you have an option in Mariota. And if your drafted quarterback is really good, you can trade Mariota. So then, you have also your Gardner Minshew, and Gardner Minshew would be, I think, an exciting and fun option. He's a really fun guy. He's got the mustache and everything, and is also pretty good. I think he's kind of like a 500 quarterback, but there could be upside there to Gardner Minshew. When he was the starter for the Jaguars, he was one of the better deep passers in the league. And I mean, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, you add another receiver, KJ Osborne emerged. What would Gardner Minshew do? Could he get you in the playoffs if you gave him enough really good options? I think in Philadelphia last year, in the time that he started, he showed that with a good team, he could play pretty well. And the third option, I'll admit, Paul, this is very selfish of me. Ryan Fitzpatrick. Ryan Fitzpatrick is the best. He is the most fun quarterback that has existed in the last, 10 years in the NFL. He's got the beard. He's got the moxie, the leadership. And the other thing is he's always okay with being your bridge guy. And he is totally happy with training your rookie quarterback and helping your youngster become a better player in the NFL. That is a great fit, I think, for the Minnesota Vikings. So there's my top 3. Who are yours?
I think mine, it's slightly a cop-out answer, but it's kind of, we assume they're drafting a quarterback in this scenario likely. And so if that's kind of the way I'm approaching it. And that means I kind of want someone who similarly fits their games. And I think there's kind of a lot of those guys out there. I think we saw with the Ravens, like when you have Lamar Jackson, then you have Tyler Huntley, who plays in a very similar way, and your offense is still catered to that type of guy, it becomes really, really valuable. And I think that would be a nice way to kind of get the rest of your team situated in a scheme around the rookie quarterback that you want to have take over after that 1 year. And so, yeah, I think of guys like Marcus Mariota. I think he would fit for someone like Malik Willis, someone who's a little bit more mobile, or even like Matt Corral, someone who's just a little bit more mobile, and he can kind of help carry through that offense. And so I think you're obviously probably going to have to do free agency before the draft, so that's where it complicates things a little bit. But if you have your eye on a guy or two or a type of guy in the draft that you want to go get, I would look really hard at a guy that really fits that kind of mold, just because then you can kind of get a jump start on building that offense. But if we're coming from a different aspect, I think Mariota has to be there. And then I think the only other guy you didn't mention that I think would just be fun, and if fans are going to take a step back, I think if Teddy came back, that would at least be another redemption arc. And he could probably fit like your Kenny Pickett type quarterback if we're, again, like forecasting this with guys you may draft. And part of a year, you're going to take a drop down. He, again, is a really good leader, a guy that you're going to like. He probably has some more aspirations other than just being a backup, but I think he would probably do really, really well with a rookie in there, helping them along, kind of understanding his position. And then you just can't overlook the fact that fans would probably be happy to have him in there. Like, they probably don't want him for their long-term option, but for a year when you're in transition, when you can have Teddy, the old highlights running of him there, and like you can kind of do that thing. I think those are two options that I would really support if the Vikings do go that route.
Yeah, I think the only issue with Teddy is, and this might sound weird, he's almost too loved. Like, if Teddy Bridgewater came here, think about last year with Denver. He went 7-7 as a starter. If he came to Minnesota and with Justin Jefferson and the supporting cast and was a 500 quarterback, which is probably kind of what he is now, who knows what he would have become. And you're right. He's a great leader, a great example, and everything else. Like, does it become hard because people like Teddy so much, and that goes for in the locker room as well, to move on if he wins some games? Or will you get the same sort of stuff with, well, what if we just added this? And what if we just gave Teddy that? Like, you kind of don't want that. You want someone with a high ceiling as your rookie quarterback that you're drafting, and then someone that you're pretty sure is not going to be your long-term option, only beyond if the guy you draft isn't good, then you draft another one. So that's the only concern I would have. As far as everything else, I mean, Teddy checks a lot of boxes, including the fact that you still, when you go to games, see a lot of Teddy Bridgewater jerseys.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that would be, like, again, for the new GM, new coach, if they're going to make big wholesale changes with the guys that they're getting rid of, bringing back someone, it's not nothing to have that guy come back and to feel good about it. The Timberwolves did it when they brought back Ricky Rubio, and he was there to mentor and kind of helped buffer during a bad season. He could be a mentor, and people were really, really excited to have him back. And I think similarly, that could be the angle with Teddy. It's not as much what he brings to the field, or that is a part of it, but it's not all of it. There's another aspect to it.
It's a good example. Yeah.
All right. So the USFL just had its draft. We talked about it on the podcast at length a little bit. But I want to know, because it's just another league starting back up, hoping to be successful, and it's gonna walk right by the XFL and all the other attempts and all their graves that are just standing right beside them. So I want to know from you, if you're starting a new football league, what are you doing to make sure it has a chance? How do you start a football league if you had the chance to do it?
Well, I think the XFL is doing it right by partnering with the NFL. And so people who tune in to see the XFL are going to see ideas that they might eventually see in the NFL. And just realistically, without an NFL connection, it's hard to get people interested. So I've got two different ideas. Idea number one is that anyone who is not a starting quarterback in the NFL, anyone who has not appeared in a game, should be eligible to be the starting quarterback for one of these, whatever it is, USFL or XFL teams. Now, I know that the USFL drafted a bunch of quarterbacks and things like that, and none of us had ever heard of them before for the most part. But, imagine if you had a developmental quarterback that could go play there, and maybe teams would be afraid of injuries and things like that. But if it's not somebody you drafted in the first round, but someone you think has legitimate talent, a Kellen Mond would be a good example. Would fans want to see Kellen Mond play in another league to get a look at what their drafted quarterback looks like? And if he agreed to it and the Players Association agreed to it, it could turn out to be really great development. This is how it worked with the NFL Europe, where quarterbacks would go over there and get opportunities to play and grow. Also, the quarterback play for side leagues is just horrendous. It's always been the biggest problem, is that if it's not some former NFL veteran backup like Tommy Maddox, who came back and played in the XFL, you're usually getting just very poor quarterback play, which makes for not fun football to watch. Or PJ Walker, who was really good. If you made backup quarterbacks eligible, I think that you would see a little more entertainment value, a little more fun, because I do believe in these side leagues, there's good receivers, there's good defensive players, running backs, but the quarterback position is just hard because there's such a huge drop off. Even in the real NFL, there's a huge drop off from the starters to the backups. So that's number one. Number two is to make it a reality show. Reality shows are successful. Inside locker room, HBO style, Hard Knocks level, but make it that's what it is. Stream the games, have them go, kind of event style from city to city, like WWE or something, and then have a documentary crew that tracks them and does an entire show. Just like, think about like Friday nights with WWE. It's on every single week and they go from place to place. I'm surprised that the XFL that was connected to WWE never tried something like this. The thing that they had built their whole entire brand on, they never tried it for football. They tried to put just teams and cities, and those teams play each other. And after the first week, everyone gets bored. So those are my ideas, Paul. Do you like either one of them?
Yeah, I do. And I like the letting the backup quarterbacks kind of play in another league. We see this in other sports. They're even doing it in like esports. Like they have like challenger teams that are competing at the same time as the like full-on professional teams, and then it gets all these rumors like, hey, this guy's kind of like killing it down there in like this challenger scene, like, and then we see a guy is struggling, and like, could they swap him out mid-season? Like if they ran concurrently, it could almost be like, well, hey, this XFL quarterback just like threw for 4 touchdowns. Like, are you telling me like this guy who threw 4 picks in this game, like we couldn't just swap him up and kind of work on that? So that would be harder if you tried to bring in backups, but I think there's kind of ways to kind of create a conversation where you're trying to move guys in between leagues, and that creates conversation. And it also, like in esports, like they have partners, like, so like the Vikings could have their, like any other sport, they have kind of their minor league team, and then you can kind of bring people up or bring people down. And even if that's in the off season, you kind of have kind of your developmental prospect league that you can kind of help bring people up in. So I think that's a really good idea. And the one gripe I have with the USFL, with their draft, I was tuning into or not really tuning into the draft, but looking through their Twitter kind of to see if I recognized any names. And I don't like that they were like, first round's going to be all quarterbacks, and then the next round's going to be all this. I wanted to see a full-on Madden draft. So as much as we can bring Madden into it, maybe we're redrafting every year or something like that, just to try to keep it fresh. But I did not like that the USFL was like drafting quarterbacks, then drafting running backs. I wanted someone, you have to take 15 quarterbacks, and then one person's going to take a shot on that other guy. They're going to take a different route. So that was my one gripe with it.
Yeah, I think they're really in tough. I mean, all these leagues are, because you have to pay a lot of people, and usually for big stadiums to try to make it work. And if you don't have a huge TV deal, how can you really, succeed as a league? So what so often happens is they get started, they have financial problems, but along the way, and this is why I always watch these leagues, along the way, there's some great stories, and some great stories came out of the XFL both times. Some great stories came out of the UFL, which I don't think people remember, but was around 2009, 2010, somewhere in that range. That's where Dante Culpepper played for the Sacramento Mountain Lions and Denny Green coached. Like, these things happen. Not very many people watch, but these things happen. And so there's always great stories that come out of them. And I'm looking forward to it for that reason.
All right, let's do one more. As you said, we're a little under a week. I don't know exactly which day it gets rolling, but you will be there. And so I want to know, now that we're a week out, we always get some big headlines coming out of the combine. So I want you to predict the headlines, the storylines that are coming out of this year's combine. It can be about a certain player or a position group, or maybe it's a Viking storyline, any storyline. I want you to predict what we're going to be talking about on Hot Routes in like a week and a half.
Well, I mean, for one, it's always the quarterbacks. It's 100% of the time. The quarterbacks are the story at the combine. Who's going to shine? Who's going to elevate themselves? How is Malik Willis going to run the 40, and how fast does he run? Because I think everybody wants to know, is that a 4.4 quarterback? How does his workout look? Does he look accurate? Does he throw the ball well? Do they measure Kenny Pickett's hands? Like, these things always become kind of a gong show. But aside from that, when I read mock drafts and things like that, and I haven't read a ton of them yet. I like to wait until after the combine to really get a feeling for where people stand. But there does not seem to be a consensus at all about the players that are going at the top. And how do they shake out by the time we're done with the combine? And then the other thing too is that beyond just the draft, and it's always fun to see who emerges, what guy runs a crazy 4.3 that's a linebacker or something else like that, or a 4.8 offensive lineman. It's always fun to see like who shows out when it comes to the combine. But the NFL rumors are at their peak at the combine. You have all the reporters there talking to all the people behind the scenes. Everybody hangs out after the events during the day and things like that. And you just get a lot of buzz that is sort of coming fast and furious over the 5-6 days that the combine goes on. And you end up with a kind of setting the stage for free agency, who's coming back to teams. This is where you could have teams discussing trades for quarterbacks and things like that. We could get a quarterback trade maybe during the combine or right after the combine before free agency. So the buzz of the combine is really the top thing that I'm interested in. And then, from our perspective, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell will speak not only to all of the reporters, like national reporters, and be at a podium, but they also do a side session with us, with just the beat people. And every year with Mike Zimmer, it was extremely insightful. He was at his best. I give Mike Zimmer credit. He was always at his best when he was talking with us at the combine. And so we're going to get our first real up close kind of one-on-one, in a way. It's going to be the whole beat, but session with those guys. And you start to get a better feel for like, what are they looking for? How is their vision for building this team? And probably there'll be a Kirk Cousins question or two at that time, but I'm really looking forward to it, man. There's a lot that comes out of it. It's always worth it to go.
Yeah. If anyone has read my draft column, I think the first one, I'm all over Kenny Pickett hand watch. Very interested. Big. He said he was going to do some exercises, like get some like physical therapy on the hand, like to try to really grow it out. So there's reports of what his hand size was. I think it was like 8.25 or something like that. And so I want to see like how much we're expanding that. And then when it does inevitably expand, the stories on what he did to get it to expand, that's going to be catnip for me.
You just have your friend pull on a pinky. Is that what you do? How do you extend the size of your hand? I think that like by that measurement, his is probably about the same size as my hand. Football is very large.
Yeah,
but it makes no difference at all. You should be worried about that.
I measure my hand after it, and my hands are bigger, and I can barely hold a football. So if that's the analysis you come to us for, but hopefully, but yeah, that's going to be at the top of my list. And then I think the NFL is cracking down on like what weird questions people can ask and stuff.
Yeah,
but there's going to be one. There's going to be one guy. Dan Campbell's going to do something. Like something's going to happen. It's going to get reported, and I'm going to be eagerly waiting for what weird question they did. Like how many times Pete Carroll took his shirt off. Like I'm gonna live for all of those.
I think it was Nick Sirianni that played rock, paper, scissors with his guys.
Yeah.
It was like
always my favorite.
That's crazy.
All right. Well, we will have plenty of coverage of the combine coming your way, of whatever happens with Kirk Cousins and the next time Kevin O'Connell talks. But Matt, thank you so much for joining me today, and we will see you next time on Hot Routes.
Thanks, Paul.